You're out late. Pull up a stool, grab a seat, right here at the counter.
I'll bore you the usual. Rough day at the office.
You could say that. But if I told you the greatest corporate collapse in history involved, like thousands of executives being slaughtered in their offices.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and the entire global logistics network burning to the waterline, plus the CEO being held hostage by the head of regional sales. Well, you'd think I was pitching you some dystopian movie.
Yeah, I mean, people like to think corporate death is quick. You know, a sudden market crash, a bad trade, a CEO caught fleeing on a private jet.
Right, right.
But true organizational collapse is, it's rarely a heart attack.
Appreciate the drink.
Right off
And
there.
yeah, you're exactly right. You look at the real heavyweights of history, and suddenly you realize that bankruptcy is this slow, agonizing, bureaucratic rot. So, welcome to tonight's deep dive. Just you, me, and the most observant bartender in town, looking over a stack of notes about the spectacular slow-motion liquidation of one of history's biggest mega corporations, the Han Group.
Specifically, their Eastern Han branch.
Exactly. It is the absolute definition of a corporate slow burn.
And what's fascinating here is that we aren't just looking at, a dusty timeline of ancient emperors.
No, not at all.
We're looking at a structural failure. The underlying mechanics of this dynasty's fall perfectly mirror modern corporate dysfunction.
I mean, I was reading through these sources, and honestly, it's exhausting. If you change the names and the dates, you're literally reading the financial pages.
Yeah, pretty much.
Our mission tonight is to trace this organization's journey from a miraculously successful franchise reboot all the way to total unmitigated Chapter 11 bankruptcy.
And we're using the language of the boardroom.
Because frankly, it's the only way the sheer absurdity of the history makes sense. So let's set the scene. Before the Eastern Han branch even opened its doors, the original Han Group had actually folded.
Total insolvency. A hostile takeover that ended in complete disaster.
Right. Some guy named Wang Mang tried to launch a startup called the Shin brand. He took over the market, but his business model was, it was a catastrophe.
He tried to move too fast, didn't he?
Oh, way too fast. He tried to overhaul the entire currency system and restructure land ownership overnight, without any buy-in from his users.
Ouch. Yeah, you can't just force an update like that.
Exactly. Burned through all his capital, alienated everyone from the executives to the mailroom, and went belly up incredibly fast. So the market was a total vacuum.
And into that vacuum steps Liu Ji.
Yeah, Liu Xu. The historical sources literally describe him as the child of destiny. I mean, in modern terms. He's that one incredibly lucky golden boy founder.
The guy who somehow secures unlimited venture capital.
Exactly. He finds the old dusty Han brand IP in a filing cabinet and successfully reboots the entire franchise.
We really need to pause on the mechanics of that, though, because reviving a dead brand is notoriously difficult.
Oh, yeah. Consumer trust is basically zero.
Right. The supply chains are shattered.
Yeah.
So for Liu Ji to step into a chaotic post-startup crash market and successfully convince everyone to buy back into the classic Han ecosystem, it requires an insane level of operational genius. I mean, he had to rebuild the entire corporate infrastructure from scratch.
Which sets a massive expectation. The new Eastern Han branch wasn't just a company, it was a miraculous comeback story.
Which makes its eventual failure so much more critical to analyze.
Well, so you have this massive comeback, the IPO is a huge success, but you don't just survive on brand nostalgia,
No, you have to secure your market share.
Right. And in the early days of the Eastern Han Company, they were aggressive. I'm talking hardcore territorial expansion. And every aggressive corporation needs a ruthless fixer.
Enter Ma Yuan.
Yes. Now, the history books politely call him a great general, but looking at what he actually did mechanically, Ma Yuan was the company's overworked senior security director.
The guy handling all the perimeter breaches, keeping the trade routes open.
Right, because in the ancient world, if your logistics routes are blocked by local competitors, your economy starves. So he wasn't sitting in a cushy corner office. He was out in the field, constantly putting out fires in the regional offices, crushing local competitors.
Suppressing hostile takeovers from border factions?
Yeah, he was the enforcer, making sure the Eastern Han monopoly remained a monopoly. And it worked. By the time the company was handed over to the CEO, known as Emperor He, they had reached their absolute peak global influence.
Market dominance was basically at 100%.
Yeah, they had essentially eliminated all meaningful external competition in their sector. They were unchallenged.
Unchallenged is an understatement.
Yeah.
They were so dominant, they actually started flirting with international diplomacy.
Oh, right, the Rome thing.
Yeah, the sources mentioned this incredible detail. The company basically looked at the map, saw the Roman Empire, and said, I want to go see Rome too.
They were thinking about cross-border mergers and global brand awareness.
Exactly.
But look, I'm reading these notes, and I need you to explain this to me. You have an ironclad security team. You have global reach. You are printing money and facing zero external threats. I've seen companies like this. They should coast for centuries. So why do they suddenly decide to sabotage themselves?
Wrong.
Like, what goes wrong in a boardroom when the stock is at an all-time high?
You're missing the underlying mechanism of human nature in an enclosed system.
Okay, lay it on me.
When you no longer have to fight external enemies to survive, the aggressive energy of your executives doesn't just dissipate, it turns inward.
Ah, yeah, of course.
The focus shifts entirely from how do we beat the competition to how do I get a bigger slice of the pie for myself?
The classic pivot from innovation to cannibalization, it's depressing how predictable it is.
It really is.
So the sources describe this phase as intense palace drama, but let's translate that into structural terms. This was a vicious, company-destroying power struggle between two specific factions.
Who is fighting?
On one side, you have the powerful consort kin, the relatives of the empress. Let's call them the entrenched board of directors. And on the other side, you have the palace eunuchs. These are the CEO's inner circle, the executive assistants.
And that dynamic is crucial. The consort kin had the formal titles and the wealth.
Right.
But the eunuchs controlled physical access to the emperor. If you control the CEO's calendar and you control what information reaches his desk, you essentially control the company budget.
Exactly. They're just tearing the C-suite apart, assassinating each other, purging departments.
Just total chaos at the top.
Yeah. And while they're throwing staplers at each other in the executive lounge, their actual management strategy completely falls apart.
Right, because nobody is watching the core business.
The sources give us a brilliant snapshot of how fatal their priorities became. Instead of fixing supply chain issues or investing in R&D, management got entirely distracted by silencing their critics.
The partisan prohibitions.
Yeah, that's what the sources call it. But let's call it what it is. It was silencing the loudest, verified influencers and thought leaders who were posting about the company's internal rot.
The elite scholars. The people who actually understood how the institutional plumbing worked and were trying to warn the public that the pipes were bursting.
Right. The company's PR strategy was just to mass ban anyone with a large following who pointed out that the products were failing.
The classic executive panic maneuver.
Instead of fixing the leaky pipes, you just fire the plumber who pointed them out. But here is the real crime.
What's that?
While they were obsessing over controlling the narrative and fighting their little boardroom turf wars, they completely, totally ignored the grassroots, the peasant class.
And we have to explain how that grassroots economy actually functioned.
Yeah.
Because it was the engine of the entire empire.
Okay, break it down.
The Han government relied on a direct land tax and a poll tax paid by independent small-scale farmers.
The entry-level employees paying the company's operating costs?
Precisely. But the executives, the board members, the eunuchs, the powerful regional families, they started using their political leverage to hoard all the land.
Oh.
Yeah. They absorbed these small, taxable farms into massive, tax-exempt private estates.
So the independent farmers were forced to become essentially untaxed serfs working for the executives.
Right. The central government literally starved itself of revenue, while the corrupt middle management got obscenely wealthy.
See, the math always catches up. You treat your foundation as entirely expendable just to fund executive vanity projects, and your spreadsheet becomes a fiction.
It's unsustainable.
Which brings us to the moment the bill came due. You ignore the grassroots long enough, and eventually the grassroots stops working.
The Yellow Turban Rebellion.
Exactly. The sources introduce this as the Yellow Turban Rebellion. But we aren't talking about a traditional historical border war here. This is where the corporate structure violently breaks.
Right.
The Yellow Turban Rebellion was, for all intents and purposes, a massive company-wide violent strike.
And a highly organized one at that, led by a man named Zhang Jiao, who really weaponized the workers' grievances.
Hold on, I need a visual for this. Are we talking about a simple worker walkout or something worse?
Oh, much worse. Imagine waking up to find your delivery drivers, your warehouse staff, and your customer service reps have all tied yellow bandanas around their heads.
Okay.
They've taken a crowbar to the mainframes, locked the doors to the facilities, and started hunting down the middle managers.
Oh, wow. It is the moment a major corporation's servers melt down because they fired all the IT staff to pay for a CEO bonus.
Total unmitigated chaos.
And the central office is paralyzed. Because they spent the last decade fighting each other instead of governing, they have no standing army ready to deal with a strike of this magnitude.
So what's their brilliant solution?
They outsource it.
Naturally.
The central office gives the regional managers the authority to raise their own private security forces to break the strike.
A catastrophic long-term decision.
Yeah.
I mean, they survived the strike, but they permanently decentralized their military power.
Exactly. So with the central office permanently delegating its security to the branches, those ambitious regional managers look around and realize there is no adult in the room anymore.
The central authority is just a ghost.
Right. So they start aggressively cannibalizing the company. Welcome to the M&A era, the Proto-Three Kingdoms timeline.
The golden age of the hostile takeover. With no regulatory body to stop them, it's pure Darwinism.
The sources give us a blow-by-blow of this vicious corporate raiding, and it reads exactly like a string of insane press releases.
Where does it start?
Let's look at the first major domino, Dong Zhuo. In corporate terms, Dong Zhuo was a toxic activist investor. He marches his private security force right into the capital, forces his way onto the board, fires the CEO, puts a literal child in the seat as a puppet, and then burns the headquarters to the ground while liquidating all the assets.
Wow.
Yeah, he makes everyone hate him.
Well, he had raw power, but zero strategic vision, which made him totally vulnerable to internal betrayal.
Enter Lu Bu, his own muscle.
Right.
Lu Bu is the aggressive corporate raider who eventually decides his boss is a liability and just assassinates him right in the middle of this chaotic restructuring.
It's just a free-for-all.
Yeah, and while the capital is burning, other regional managers are executing flawless, hostile takeovers of local market share.
Because it's completely unregulated, violent capitalism.
Physical assets are changing hands every week.
But, you know, in a fractured market like that, physical assets like warehouses and land only get you so far.
Right, eventually you need more.
Legitimacy becomes the most valuable currency. Whoever controls the underlying intellectual property controls the industry. That's what triggered the next major shift.
Which brings us to the masterstroke of business strategy by Cao Cao. Cao Cao didn't just win military victories.
What did he do?
He went into the crumbling headquarters and took Emperor Xin hostage, or, as the sources politely phrase it, holding the emperor to command the nobles.
Let's translate that.
Yeah, Cao Cao secured the exclusive brand authorization. He got the puppet CEO in his pocket. Suddenly, Cao Cao isn't just a regional warlord.
No, he is legally acting on behalf of the Han Group. He holds the trademark.
Exactly. It's a brilliant leverage of soft power.
Yeah, because if you hold the official corporate seal, you can legally label all of your competitors as unlicensed rogue operators or rebels. You dictate the terms of the market.
It was genius. But not everyone was a genius. Take Yuan Shu, for example.
Now this guy.
This guy, I mean, talk about a catastrophic business decision. Yuan Shu looks at the chaos and basically executes a massive, highly publicized IPO declaring himself emperor.
Yeah.
He declares his company an independent unicorn without securing a single dime of funding, without a viable product, and without the official brand authorization.
What was he thinking?
I don't know. He just printed new business cards that said emperor and waited for the market to reward him.
A completely unfunded mandate. He made himself a massive target without the structural capital to defend his valuation.
Right. He became a laughingstock and an easy mark. Cao Cao, acting as the premium industry leader with the official brand authorization, swoops in and completely bankrupts it.
Which eventually sets the stage for the ultimate industry showdown, the Battle of Guandu.
Two mega corporations going head-to-head. Cao Cao versus Yuan Shao.
This is the ultimate case study in resource management. If we connect this to modern business theory, Guandu is the classic story of an agile, lean operation dismantling a bloated legacy bureaucracy.
Break that down for me, because on paper, Yuan Shao should have crushed him. He had the market share, he had the capital, he had the manpower.
He had abundant resources, yes.
Okay.
But his internal management was disastrous. Yuan Shao was running a dinosaur.
Right.
His executives were constantly backstabbing each other. His decision-making process was painfully slow, and he refused to listen to his analysts.
And Cao Cao?
Cao Cao, by contrast, was operating on a shoestring budget. His capital was incredibly small. But his supply chain was tight, his team was unified, and his execution was flawless.
Flawless is right. Cao Cao didn't just line up and fight him. He found the vulnerability. He personally led a strike team to raid Wukao, which was Yuan Shao's primary logistics hub. He burned Yuan Shao's operating capital to the ground in a single night.
He bankrupts Yuan Shao, not by outspending him, but by outmanaging him.
Exactly.
It proves that in a volatile market, agility and clear, decisive leadership will always beat raw, mismanaged capital.
It's beautiful in a ruthless sort of way. So Cao Cao effectively acquires almost all the northern assets of the Han Group. He is the undisputed market leader.
But, there's a funny thing about aggressive expansion.
Oh, here we go.
Eventually, you push too hard and the market pushes back.
Right. Cao Cao wasn't satisfied with being the biggest player. He wanted a total global monopoly. So he looks down south.
Because the market always seeks equilibrium. When a conglomerate gets that large, it naturally triggers an aggressive anti-monopoly market correction.
The Battle of Red Cliffs.
Yeah.
Cao Cao tries to consolidate the entire industry. But down south, you have two scrappy garage-style startup companies.
Right.
One run by Sun Quan, the other by Liu Bei. They look at Cao Cao's massive conglomerate coming to buy them out, and they realize they can't survive alone. So they form a strategic alliance.
A joint venture specifically designed to break the monopoly.
Exactly.
And they succeed by targeting the infrastructure.
Wait, push pause. You're telling me a few scrappy startups just magicked up a fleet and took down Cao's unstoppable monopoly at Red Cliffs? I don't buy it.
What do you mean?
A monopoly with that much capital and momentum doesn't just lose to agility. There has to be a catch.
Oh, there is a catch. They didn't lose to agility alone. They lost to a geographic moat and terrible executive arrogance.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, Cao's executives were northern land warfare specialists. They were cavalry commanders. They tried to acquire a maritime company, fighting on the massive Yangtze River without actually knowing how to sail.
Oh, man.
Their troops were getting seasick. So what did Cao do? He ordered all his massive transport ships to be chained together to create a stable, non-rocking platform.
Oh, no. He centralized his entire supply chain into one massive, highly flammable point of failure.
Exactly. It was a textbook disruption. Yeah. The massive conglomerate became too heavy, too inflexible, and was operating completely outside its core competency.
And the startups exploited that critical vulnerability.
Yep. They used fire ships. They literally tossed a match into that chained-together fleet and watched the whole thing burn.
Wow. They literally burned his global logistics chain to the waterline, tanked his stock, and permanently shattered his dream of 100% monopoly.
The market was officially split into 3 competing firms.
And that permanent market correction brings us to the final act. Fast forward a few decades. The original Eastern Han brand has been a zombie corporation for years.
It only existed on paper.
Right, because Cao Cao found it useful to operate under the franchise license. But Cao Cao passes away. His son, Cao Pai, takes over as CEO of the Cao faction.
Okay.
And Cao Pai looks at the books, looks at the fractured market, and says, why are we still paying franchise fees to this dead brand?
He was tired of the charade. The IP no longer offered any leverage.
Exactly. The pretense was over. He marches into the office of the nominal CEO, Emperor Xian, and he slides a piece of paper across the desk.
A forced share transfer agreement.
Yep. No more holding the emperor hostage. No more proxy wars. He forces the signature. The Eastern Han brand is officially deregistered. The servers are unplugged.
The logo is taken off the building.
The company is completely liquidated and relaunched under a new, wholly owned brand called Cao Wei. The Han Group, after hundreds of years, is gone.
It's a sobering conclusion. And it neatly wraps up the structural analysis we've been doing tonight.
It really does.
If you trace the line from the early expansion under Ma Yuan all the way to that final signature forced by Cao Pai, the lesson is stark. It proves that no matter how strong your initial security team was, no matter how much global market share you captured at your peak, internal rot is fatal.
Yeah.
When a company obsesses over office politics, vanity PR metrics, and silencing critics, while simultaneously starving the grassroots foundation that actually generates the value, it will inevitably lead to a forced liquidation.
It's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when the grassroots finally decide to break your servers. So what does this all mean for us sitting here at the bar at this hour? I'll tell you. The wild ride of the Han Group's Eastern branch isn't just a history lesson, it's a warning label.
Right.
Survival requires looking after your glass roots. It requires maintaining your foundation, keeping the actual economic engine running, not just playing boardroom games and manipulating your public relations.
You simply cannot PR your way out of a broken supply chain and a starving workforce.
No, you really can't.
The mechanics of collapse really don't change, whether you are wearing ancient silk robes or tailored modern suits. But here's a thought for the cab ride home.
I'm listening.
The Han Group went completely bankrupt. The corporation dissolved. But the brand identity didn't die. It became so deeply ingrained in the culture that it outlived the executives, the warlords, and the dynasty itself.
That's true.
It became the cultural trademark of the people. The Han Chinese. It makes you wonder, long after today's too-big-to-fail mega corporations inevitably go under, what fragments of their corporate culture or their algorithms will our descendants just assume is basic human nature?
Now that is a heavy thought to end the night on. Look closely at the headlines tomorrow. You might just spot a few executives fighting in the boardroom while the foundation starts to crack. Thanks for pulling up a stool and joining us for this deep dive. Finish your drink, get home safe, and we'll see you next time. Good night.